Today is the 24th of July, 2021. It's the full moon, the last Uposatha day of what they call the hot season in the Pali calendar, the Buddhist calendar. Very much the beginning of the hot season for us in America, in the West. So this is Asalha Puja, and this is the day that on the full moon of Asalha, or the full moon of July as we know it, then that's the day, according to our stories, our legends, according to the suttas, that the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta was taught. So the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, the first teaching of the Buddha given to the 5 ascetics, the first 5 bhikkhus. And these are the people who practiced with the Buddha when he was still a bodhisattva, when he was not yet the Buddha. And also then, tomorrow is the entering of the Vasa period, what we call the rains retreat. So in very much the monsoon season in Southeast Asia, where the tradition comes from. And this Asalha Puja, it also commemorates the first Vasa after the Buddha's awakening. So the full moon of May being Visakha Puja, commemorating the enlightenment of the Buddha, and then the Buddha, after spending 49 days in the bliss of deliverance in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree, and then making his way to Varanasi, to the deer park at Isipatana, so walking by stages, and then, so the timing, you got the full moon of May, you got June, July, so 2 months, roughly 2 months after the Enlightenment. So you could say it took him maybe a little under a month to walk that distance from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi. And so he made his way there to teach the first 5 disciples. Yeah. And the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta talks about, in the very beginning, the avoiding the 2 extremes, one extreme of self-indulgence and the other extreme of self-annihilation or self-mortification. And so when the Bodhisattva was practicing self-mortification, that's when these 5 ascetics were practicing with him. And when he realized that wasn't the path, so he was doing these terrible things to himself. He was going without eating, and then eating very little, eating 1 little piece of fruit a day for periods of time, and then also going without any food at all. And he was also doing things like holding his breath for as long as he could. And when that wasn't enough, he was trying to, and then he tried to close off all the sense bases, close his eyes, close his ears, try to see if that was the path to enlightenment. And so he said he experienced immense pain while doing that, and that it didn't bring him to enlightenment, that wasn't the way. So then when he realized that, and he was nearly dead from starvation, and all of his body hairs fell out, and he could barely stand. So then and these 5 ascetics were with him, and we can ascertain that they weren't going to that extreme, but they were watching him and hoping he would attain some sort of superhuman state based on that immense pain he was causing himself. And then the Bodhisattva realizing, that wasn't the path. It wasn't a matter of the body. It's a matter of training the mind. And the mind is very tight and tense when the body is in such an extreme state of pain, that he decided to go alms around again and nurse himself back to health, take some food. And so when he did that, then these 5 ascetics were disgusted with him, uninspired, and they said he had reverted to luxury. He decided to give up his striving and revert to luxury, luxurious living, i.e. taking a little bit of food and nursing himself back to health. So they left disgusted and went their own way. So then fast forward to the awakening of the Buddha, then he thinks, oh, well, even though those 5 guys were disgusted with me, they just didn't know. They were a little bit misguided, but they do have some spiritual qualities, so they could probably understand the Dhamma, and they know how to meditate. Their spiritual faculties are quite well developed, so they could probably understand the Dhamma. So the Buddha makes his way to the deer park at Isipatana outside of Benares, and he then gives them the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta as the first teaching, and Kondanya becomes Anya Kondanya, the Kondanya who knows. So he becomes the first stream enterer under the Buddha. After that, spending the first Vasa together with them, spending the rainy season together with those 5 ascetics, practicing again, but now practicing rightly, whereas before they were practicing the wrong way, now they're practicing the right way together, and by stages then, and at some point during that Vasa period, teaching the Anattalakkhana Sutta, and all 5 of them attaining arhatship. And then at some point later during that Vasa, then the clansman Yasa wanders in, and then it goes from there. The whole Buddha Sasana gets going from there. So this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, it's something Luangpo Sumedho refers to as a perfect teaching. And it's just so simple and yet so all-encompassing in its entirety. Every part of it encompasses the whole rest of the sutta. So even just the beginning of the sutta, there are these 2 extremes, the extreme of self-indulgence and the extreme of self-mortification or self-annihilation. That's not the way. So we're always wanting to go to extremes. Like we either want to do something, like have that more is better approach. So like if self-indulgence, so we have some sort of good food that we like and we think, well, more is better. So if we have this teaching, it's the ultimate teaching for awakening, and yet it's so applicable, it's so practical. So just taking that teaching of self-indulgence, okay, well, 1 piece of cake is good, 1 donut is good, so 2 donuts are better, right? I mean, it's completely logical. And if 2 donuts are good, then 3 donuts is even better, 4 donuts is even better, 5 donuts, 6 donuts, 7 donuts, we feel sick, 8 donuts, 9 donuts, and we can't even go near donuts after that. We feel sick to our stomach, and so it sounds kind of funny, but that's looking at the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta in terms of self-indulgence. Well, more is better. We can apply that to anything. We think, well, it was a good experience. It was fun eating 1 donut, so 10 donuts should be 10 times the fun. But it's actually not that way. At a certain point, it's not fun anymore, and we feel sick. So that that's just the way it is. Or we take it to the other extreme. We think, well, okay, 1 day of fasting is good, so 2 days, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of fasting is going to be better. But then it becomes just racking the body, painful, so we have to find some sort of balance here. We can eat good food, but we eat just the right amount. Or we can do austerities, but we do the right amount that's helpful, but at a certain point it gets too tense. So this is the extremes between being too loose and and too tense. There's those two extremes. This is also an image or a simile which appeared to the Buddha, and later on in these Thai cartoons that they have, the life of the Buddha, they kind of go a little bit more by the commentaries. They say, well, okay, the Buddha, during his striving, one of the ways he realized that it was too tight was Saka came down and actually played guitar for him, and he had this realization that actually it was like the striving or the asceticism was like the guitar that was strung too tight, that the strings were too tight, and if you tightened them, it was out of tune, even to the point of the strings could break. So he saw that with the being overly ascetic, the mind was too tense, and then with indulgence, it's like the strings are tuned too loose, and they just don't sound good at all. And so the strings have to be tuned just right, and then the mind is just right for the Dhamma. And then the Buddha goes on to talk about dukkha, which is translated variously as suffering. Stress is a very good translation. Unsatisfactoriness, not quite rightness. That's dukkha. There's this sense that things aren't quite right. There's dukkha. So we can see dukkha or imbalance. We might say dukkha, see it as imbalance, some sort of imbalance. So we can see dukkha in ourselves. We can see dukkha in others. So we say there is dukkha, not life is dukkha. So that gets misinterpreted sometimes, that the Buddha was saying life is dukkha. So that's not what he said. He said there is dukkha, or dukkha it exists. There is this truth of things aren't quite right, things are unsatisfactory, so we're seeking some sort of alleviation from this sense of, there's a sense of lack, or there's a hole in the heart that we're trying to fill, and we're trying to do that all the time. And so we seek. So we're seeking all the time to fulfill this sense of lack that we're experiencing. So that's dukkha. Etymologically, the word dukkha, like du is like not good, su is good. Du is like dissonance. Su is more like it's together, it's balanced, it's in tune. So ka is like the hub of a wheel. So it's like when the or like the axle, you could say it's like the axle of a wheel. And so when the ka or the axle is du, it's not quite right, and the wheel wobbles. It doesn't go smooth, so it's not true. Like when you talk about the word true in terms of a wheel, or truing up a wheel, when you true up a wheel, you make it spin perfectly without moving, without wobbling. And so sukha is like the ka is su. The ka or the axle is like in the right spot, and the wheel rolls smoothly. So if you see a car, if a car has dukkha in terms of the word itself, if a car has dukkha, it's going to like one of the wheels, like the car is kind of like, it's sort of like wobbling up and down. It's like one of these cartoon cars that you like, it's just kind of like, or like the Flintstones, that would be the extreme, like the wheels are just like made of rock, and they're just kind of wobbling, and they're not smooth. It's not a very smooth ride. And sukha is like the wheel that's trued up, it's perfect, and you got a smooth ride. So sukha is like the happiness. Dukkha is suffering, sukha is happiness or ease. The Buddha says Nibbanang paramang sukhang, which is Nibbana is the highest happiness, Nibbana is the ultimate happiness. So even though Nibbana in its truest sense, it transcends dukkha and sukha. The Buddha also classed it as one type of sukha, or one type of happiness. So there is dukkha. We see it in ourselves, we see it outside of ourselves, we see it in ourselves, we see it in the world. Dukkha, not quite rightness, or just wrongness, just sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That's also dukkha. So it can be subtle dukkha, or it can be extreme dukkha. So that's a noble truth. We see there is dukkha either in ourselves, but also if we see it in others, we can say there is dukkha. Okay, there's dukkha. I see that. There's more dukkha. If we meet somebody who's not doing very well, we can say there's dukkha. So we can cultivate compassion. Compassion is the wish for someone else to be free of dukkha. It can be also compassion for ourselves. It's the wish for ourselves to be free of dukkha, and it's the wish for others to be free of dukkha. Slight difference between metta and karuna. Metta is goodwill, or usually translated as loving kindness. Metta is the wish for ourselves or others to be happy. Karuna is the wish for ourselves or others to be free of suffering. So there's a slightly different emphasis there. So acknowledging the noble truth of dukkha, there is dukkha. Things don't go right for us. Separation from the liked, or things just don't go our way. Even just tonight, there was like a package that was supposed to arrive, or something supposed to be in a package, and then it wasn't there because it was something that was not easy to see, easily lost. And so that's dukkha. It didn't go the way we wanted it to. So even little things like can be dukkha, can be stressful. So learning how to see that sense of stress when things don't go our way. But there's always something that's not right. There's always something that's not going our way. So there's always something that's going to be stressful. So then we look at the cause of dukkha, the second noble truth, and the Buddha is saying, well, that's the tanha, and he categorizes it into three different types: the kama tanha, bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha. But these are all just tanha. It's wanting things to be other than what they are. So when there's dukkha, there's that sense of things aren't quite right in the moment, so we want things to be other than what they are. We need to seek, we need to strive, need to change something, shift something somehow. And then because of avijja, because of a misunderstanding in our mind, then we think we need to change something outside of ourselves to make it better. So we don't really think that tanha or craving is the cause of dukkha. We think that situation is the cause of dukkha, that person is the cause of dukkha, that 10th donut is the cause of dukkha. So we see that it's outside of ourselves that's causing dukkha, but it's actually something we can deal with inside. So when we start to take responsibility for the dukkha, we see that, actually what the Buddha's teaching with the Four Noble Truths is wanting things to be other than what they are is dukkha. That's the cause of dukkha. So that's very empowering for us because we can actually deal with it inside of ourselves. It's not changing something outside. We can shift and change and deal with situations endlessly outside of ourselves. Doesn't mean we don't deal with situations. We do what we can, but sometimes we just have to. We have to tell ourselves we've done everything we can. to change that situation, and then we just have to back off. So the dukkha is inside, that sense of things that are unsatisfactory, or that sense of it's still not right. I still need to do something else. So we look at that and we deal with that inside. We see that that's the cause of dukkha, really. So just to reiterate, the misunderstanding, or what we call avijja, that's ignorance, not seeing things rightly according to nature. So avijja. So because of this because of this misunderstanding in the mind, we think they're the cause of dukkha, it's the cause of dukkha, or because I was born a certain way, that's the cause of dukkha. We don't see tanha as the cause of dukkha, so that's what the Buddha is trying to point out. That's what we don't yet know. So we may have studied the teachings. We may have studied the teachings and intellectually understood the teachings and studied books on the Four Noble Truths and even studied books on dependent origination, Paticca which is actually just an extension of the Four Noble Truths. So we may have studied about that and felt like it's true and intellectually understood it, but then when push comes to shove, when the wheel hits the road, then we don't really know deep inside that craving is the cause of dukkha. We think this person is the cause of dukkha, that person is the cause of dukkha, this situation is the cause of dukkha, that government is the cause of dukkha, this pandemic is the cause of dukkha, that disease is the cause of dukkha, this person who doesn't agree with me is the cause of dukkha, that situation is the cause of dukkha, this pain in my knee is the cause of dukkha, this pain in my back is the cause of dukkha. So we're just bringing it back to this heart, this tanha, wanting things to be other than what they are, is where the stress is, where the dukkha is. So that's very radical. That's a very unusual teaching. So the Buddha then breaks it up into kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. That's the kama is the sensuality, the craving for sensuality. Bhava tanha is the craving to be or become. Vibhava tanha, the craving to not be or not, or the craving, you could say, to disappear, to not be, to annihilate. That's the vibhava tanha. So this is very profound because our tendency is then when we hear about the teachings, we say, okay, we get really inspired, we want to practice, we want to understand this quickly because it seems true, it seems like a good teaching. So then we say, okay, I'm going to overcome sensuality and I'm going to be restrained, I'm going to practice, I'm going to do the sense restraint that the Buddha is talking about, I'm going to come back inward. But then we get caught in the bhava tanha, which is trying to get somewhere, trying to become enlightened. So then we see that, and then we think, okay, I just want to be done with it. I just want to be done with samsara. I want to be done with everything. I want to be done with the world, go to the monastery, ordain. And then the mind goes into the vibhava tanha, which is that desire for just be done with it, just go into oblivion. So that's out of balance as well. So then we say, okay, this is more difficult than I thought. This is more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And then we say, okay, well, yep, they said that it's just craving is the cause of suffering. It's not something outside of myself. So then we get very critical and judgmental of ourselves. Oh, there I go again, craving again. Oh, there I go again, making myself suffer again. Or we get very harsh with ourselves, and then that goes back into the kind of wanting to just crush ourselves into submission. Oh, yeah. There you go again, craving again. You're just stupid. You're just being stupid again. And just we can be very, very hard on ourselves and very severe with ourselves, actually. And that's kind of how it goes with the practice as well. So that's also aggravating the problem. So what we're doing is we're trying to come back to this sense of balance, and very, very patient. We have to be very, very patient with ourselves. And again, this doesn't mean we don't try to change external situations at all. We still have to look after ourselves, and we still have to do what's good for the body. We have to know what foods agree with us. It doesn't mean when we get sick we don't take any medicine at all, or like we don't object to things that are wrong in the world. So it doesn't mean that, but it means ultimately we don't have much control we don't have much say in what happens in the outside world, but we do have some say in terms of how we train ourselves. So we can empower ourselves to actually do that, actually do the training for ourselves, actually train the mind. And then it's the open Aiko, where it actually goes inward. We intellectually understand the teachings, and then we take it inward, and eventually the heart starts to understand. If we keep practicing, we don't give up on the practice. We do the Sila Samadhi Panya, the virtue, meditation, wisdom. We keep following that path, we stay on that path, and eventually things start to open up. And it's quite helpful that we have these good examples, not only the Buddha so long ago, but we also have the various ajahns that we have faith in, Ajahn Man, Ajahn Chah, and so on. So we have these various teachers and examples that show us that maybe this is actually possible to really come to an end of dukkha and be done with it. To be done with it in a way that's not vibhava tanha, but actually through insight, through balance. So the third noble truth the Buddha talks about is the nirodha, the dukkha nirodha, and that's that complete abandonment, complete relinquishment of that very craving, of that tanha. So to do that, really starting to try to see how that process is working in terms of seeing the dukkha, seeing the unsatisfactoriness, seeing how we keep running up against a wall with things like anger, craving, trying to make things conform to the way we want it. Yeah. So when we do that and our desires get thwarted, then we experience stress. And this is the whole reason we come to the monastery and hold the 8 precepts. Anybody who's living in the monastery is holding the 8 precepts, and we see that if we do this for a period of time, yes, the desires, the latent tendencies, what we call the anusaya, the latent tendencies are going to get frustrated. When we're in a situation where we can just do as we please, seek distraction from suffering as we please, then we kind of remain in a state of mediocrity and we don't really see the suffering coming up. So something that's very common is actually going to the monastery and thinking that the defilements get worse in the monastery. That's very common. We think, we start meditating and we start running up against ourselves and we think, it's getting worse. I better leave. Like this is terrible. So guaranteed that what we're seeing is something that's been there under the surface all the time. It's just being uncovered, so that's a good thing. That's the medicine's working. That's actually what's supposed to happen. So we're cleaning house, we're dredging up the hidden things in the heart, the anusaya, the latent tendencies. And that's a good thing. We're starting to see the stress that those cause. And then we're really dealing with it. When those things come up, we're actually learning how to deal with these things. Then the path, the whole path. So the path to the cessation of suffering, that's the applied Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha is actually giving us precepts and practices and ways of going about this. So he's not saying like, just let go. Just, when somebody, how annoying it is when somebody walks up to you and just says, just let go. It's like, that's so irritating. And maybe we think, the ending of suffering is if that person wouldn't say that to me anymore. And so, because it's not clear, we need the whole path. To really let go, to really relinquish, we need the path. We need the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. We need that whole thing, and the Buddha's laying it out. So if we study the Noble Eightfold Path and get to know it, that's the lived teaching. And then it goes around in a circle. That's how the Buddha is actually giving us a path to be able to see dukkha. So this also entails being very, very forgiving with ourselves, being very kind to ourselves and others, and seeing that, okay, well, everybody here is trying to practice in their own way, and everybody is where they're at too. This is one of the signs of a great person. We call it atanyuta, knowing oneself, or knowing where you're at. That's the sign of a great person, is actually making an honest assessment of yourself, and a very true assessment of yourself, and then that's integrity also. So we start to develop a very strong sense of integrity and honesty. That's also part of the path. So when the Buddha was awakened, he's actually he spent quite a bit of time under the Bodhi tree and around the vicinity of the Bodhi tree in the area, trying to just put into words just how difficult it would be to put into words, to formulate an actual teaching that would be efficacious for people, that would help to lead people onto the path. And the fact that he actually came up with these Four Noble Truths and laid it out for these 5 ascetics, the first 5 bhikkhus, it's pretty amazing. It's wonderful. And even though we are empowered to do this practice for ourselves, there's really no way we could do it without this teaching. So we are actually relying on something from outside. So this is just one of the wonderful and amazing aspects of the Buddha's teaching, that there actually is this teaching which we can guide and direct ourselves to experience less and less suffering and more ease and well-being. It's through cultivating all these wholesome qualities, relinquishing all these unwholesome qualities. And it's just, there's these phrases that come up in the suttas, and we might feel this way sometimes, even this incredible, wonderful, marvelous, that the Buddha's taught us about so many wholesome things and taught us to relinquish so many unwholesome things. And could we have ever figured that out on our own, to actually do that? Would we actually be clear enough to actually be able to do that without the Buddha's teaching? So some people some extraordinary people might be gifted with virtue from birth. I know I'm not in that category. I didn't grow up as some sort of, extremely virtuous, reincarnate child or something. It's like, without these teachings, I think I'd just be totally lost. But then we've got to start somewhere. Sometimes you read biographies of like great ajahns, or in any tradition, great yogis, and they were very virtuous from birth. The Dalai Lama, good example, or like, Ajahn Dan. But then, for the rest of us, like, I can think, well, I had to learn these things, but having been pointed out, oh yeah, it makes sense. I can actually cultivate those things. So really, anybody can do it. It's just a matter of applying oneself. It doesn't take any special talent, but what it takes is actually that perseverance and persistence patience. So we recollect some of these things. We're going to do a circumambulation after this, and having recollected the Buddha and the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta and some of the qualities of that, then I'll leave the talk there for this evening.